Okay, so we are looking at whoops, hold on one second. Go that way. At the wisdom of Ben Sira. It's known by Ben Sira. It can also be known as Ecclesiasticus or Sirach. It goes by a bunch of different names. And some of it depends on what Bible you're looking at, what they call it. All right, and so the theme that we're going to look at with this is godly wisdom and daily living. So, what is one piece of advice you've received growing up that stuck with you? One piece of advice that you were given when you were growing up that stuck with you.
I could.
Don't marry the first man that comes along, but I didn't really listen to that.
Okay.
If you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything.
Yeah.
What was that?
Wait not, want not.
Nancy,
No,
what did Nancy?
if you don't have anything good to say, don't say anything.
Yeah, right.
That was another one.
Okay, good. So we all gotten some advice along the way. Okie doke. So let me
Along with eat everything on your plate because there's kids over there.
They're starving.
Starving.
Yeah.
there's
I
people
don't think it was so
starving.
much what was said, was what the example was. I mean, my father was an extremely kind, very sweet man who, set an example for how we should act. I mean, he was never said a nasty word about anybody. And, he was kind of a role model that way.
All right. So let me share my screen with you. Because we're going to start off tonight like we kind of have been doing, looking at the Bible video. Okay, so can everybody see the screen okay?
Yep.
All right, so let's move along here and we'll...
The Wisdom of Ben Sira,
Everybody
which
hear it okay?
is also known by its Greek title, the Book of Sirach, or by its Latin name, Ecclesiasticus. Whatever you call the book, it's a collection of proverbs and wisdom poetry by a renowned Jewish sage named Yeshua ben Sira. He lived in Jerusalem near the beginning of the 2nd century BC, and at his own school, he trained young Jewish men for political and religious leadership in Israel. Ben Sira studied the Hebrew scriptures from his youth, so his words and his teachings are saturated with biblical language and themes. But he also labored to develop his own insights, so that through his teachings, the wisdom of the ancient scriptures could be passed on in a new way to the next generation. Ben Sira wrote his book in Hebrew, and while it was not included in the oldest form of the Hebrew Bible, it was highly regarded by many Jewish communities after it was written. Ben Sira's grandson translated the book into Greek around 130 BC, and it was this translation that later became popular among many early Christian communities. This is why it was eventually included in the Deuterocanon of Roman Catholic and Orthodox traditions, while later Jewish and Protestant communities didn't recognize it as part of their Bible. Throughout Ben Sira's teaching, he persuades his young Jewish students to remain faithful to Israel's God in a world that was increasingly hostile to their way of life. Ben Sira restates the main themes of Proverbs. To truly honor God, one must live by wisdom and by the fear of the Lord. But he makes extra clear that this means living by Israel's covenant laws found in the Torah. There was great pressure from the surrounding Greek culture to abandon their unique way of life, and Ben Sira insists that wisdom and Torah are the only way to true honor before God and other people. Ben Sira organized this large collection of his teaching into sections by the placement of 3 long poems that are interconnected by common themes taken up from the book of Proverbs. And these poems surround 2 large blocks of wisdom teaching. The opening poem calls the reader to live by God's wisdom, adopting the motto from Proverbs chapter 1, verse 7, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom." For Ben Sira, fear refers to a deep sense of reverence and a healthy trepidation before God that reminds me of my small place in the universe. It's a moral mindset that submits to God's wisdom and gives up the right to define right and wrong for myself, even when it's difficult or inconvenient. The poem goes on to develop an image from Proverbs chapter 8. God's own wisdom that created and sustains the cosmos is portrayed like an elegant woman who can be pursued and embraced only by those who fear the Lord. Those who find and live by this wisdom will be showered with her abundance and honor. This is Ben Sira's way of showing that being faithful to Israel's God is living in tune with the cosmic order of creation. But what does a life of divine wisdom really look like? In chapters 2 to 23, Ben Sira has collected dozens of proverbs and wise sayings about a variety of topics: anger and forgiveness, lending money and gift-giving, sex and marriage, how to behave at public banquets, how to choose your friends, how to cultivate virtuous character traits like generosity and patience and self-control. Among all these proverbs, you'll find 3 poems that recall the opening poem about pursuing Lady Wisdom. For Ben Sira, every part of life, however ordinary, is to be transformed by pursuing wisdom and the fear of the Lord. At the very center of the book is a remarkable poem about divine Lady Wisdom and the Torah. It's inspired by Proverbs chapter 8, but with a twist. We learn that God's wisdom permeates the universe because by it, God orders and sustains all things. But this wisdom cannot be found just anywhere. God's chosen that his wisdom would come to dwell among one specific people, the Israelites. He depicts Lady Wisdom as God's glory that came to take up residence in Israel's tabernacle and later the Jerusalem temple. Ben Sira makes this connection because it's already there in the Hebrew Bible. In the stories about the tabernacle and the temple's construction, God's Spirit fills the craftsman with God's wisdom to build a place for God's glory to dwell. But Ben Sira goes further. Because the temple was a symbolic Garden of Eden, he describes God's glorious wisdom in the temple as a new tree of life and like the river of life, offering wisdom and blessing to God's people. Then Ben Sira bundles all of these images together. God's glory and wisdom and the tree and river of life can all be found in the Torah of Moses. The Torah is where people hear God's own words and wisdom, where they can enter into God's glorious presence and find true life. This remarkable poem shows how Ben Sira read the scriptures as a unified network of stories and patterns, making one overall point. The way to true life is by living in covenant relationship with God and living by his wisdom. After this comes another collection of wisdom teaching with dozens more proverbs about all kinds of topics, and the reader should be aware. The influence of Ben Sira's social location and his prejudice is pretty clear in this section. He was a wealthy upper-class man who viewed slaves and women as inferior. This comes out in his offensive comments about women, especially ones that he does not like, and about the low value of daughters. He's expressing a patriarchal value system that was widespread in his day. But his words stand in contrast to the more positive, honorable portraits of women found throughout the Hebrew Bible and in the stories about Jesus and in the rest of the New Testament. The climactic finish to Ben Sira's work is a long poem honoring Israel's faithful ancestors. It's a celebration of the most famous, faithful characters in the Hebrew Bible: Abraham and Moses, Aaron, Joshua, Caleb, Samuel, David, and so on. He praises each one for their loyalty to Israel's God and to the Torah of Moses. Ben Sira holds them up as examples of the character traits he's been promoting in the book, and the last praiseworthy figure in this poem is not from the biblical past, but from Ben Sira's present: Simon, son of Onias, who was the high priest of the Jerusalem temple. He describes Simon as the ultimate man of wisdom who enters the temple to offer sacrifices and represent the people before God, requesting God's mercy and blessing upon Israel. After this, Ben Sira concludes his book with a prayer and a poem of wisdom. He first prays to thank God for delivering him from trouble in the past, and this gives him the confidence to praise God for the deliverance of Israel he'll perform in the future. Then the book concludes with a final poem about pursuing Lady Wisdom. Ben Sira talks about how he embraced God's wisdom and lived by the fear of the Lord, and then experienced a life of blessing. These two poems go together, and they make Ben Sira's final offer to his students. The future well-being of Israel and of each one of his disciples will only come by a life submitted to God's wisdom. The book of Ben Sira offers us a unique window into the life of an ancient biblical scholar. He shows us how educated Israelites read and understood their scriptures in the period of the Bible's final formation. He also shows us what mattered to these early readers of the Bible. Ben Sira saw people forgetting God's wisdom found in the scriptures, and he cared most about passing on to the next generation the values of God's wisdom and living in the fear of the Lord, but restated in a new way for his time and place. And that's what the wisdom of Ben Sira is all about.
Okay.
Interesting.
So, what do you think about the video? What'd you hear that was interesting? There's only a few of you tonight, so you can't hide.
Yeah.
A question about his name, Yeshua.
Yeah, Yeshua.
Yeah,
Yeshua,
was that
Joshua.
Yeshua? I thought that meant Jesus.
Well, it means Yeshua means Joshua.
Oh, Joshua.
Yeah, so it's Yeshua, Joshua, same kind of same root.
Okay.
So there was we tend to think of Jesus as a unique name.
Right. And it wasn't.
No, it wasn't a unique name.
Okay.
So Yeshua, God saves.
What was that bit about? If a daughter is born, it's a loss.
Yeah, isn't that fun?
What's his problem?
But there are cultures even today still that feel that way.
Well, you gotta remember that, okay, what kind of culture was it at the time? It's very patriarchal.
Patriarch.
Yeah.
And so, women had a less than position in that type of culture. So I'm sorry, scorpions amongst us.
Oh.
These books are
He was
all
calling a bad woman a scorpion, though.
No, it's women were like scorpions.
But then he praised other women in the Bible.
well,
Well, those ones he specifically mentioned, though, none of them were women.
Yeah, the heroes of the faith were not women.
Yeah, heroes that he mentioned or whatever they were never, because I'm thinking, all right, I'm waiting to hear a woman's name, but he never mentioned a woman.
That's because you're scorpions.
but he did say woman. He did comment on a woman being okay.
Yeah, that's
Lady Wisdom.
Yeah, but
So-
even before that, when he was naming the other famous ones in the Bible, he did have a good word after that, and he said, "And the women," but he didn't name any specific.
The nameless scorpions that bring up the rear.
Yeah. Huh.
All right. What any questions as you listen to that do you have?
Why are these books so similar to other books like Proverbs? They pull from.
Well, in some ways, you got to think of them as kind of commentary type things or addition type things. I guess in some ways, it would be like it's like what C.S. Lewis does with the Narnia tales. He's taking, biblical stuff, and in some ways, creating a similar type of story. And that's what they're doing with this type of stuff is, using the biblical text that's there and either, kind of embellishing it a little bit and adding to it, or using a similar kind of thing to kind of restate and repurpose things. We're going to see that. I forget if it's next week or the week after when we get to Daniel. There's several additions to the book of Daniel. So you got the book of Daniel, and then they got these little things that they put in it. So the prayer of Azariah, Bel and the Dragon, and Susanna. Until recently, I always thought that they were separate books, but they're not separate books. They're additions to the book of Daniel. So that's kind of why they do things. So they're books that are, similar, have similar kind of wisdom and those kinds of things, and are meant to edify the body and kind of increase biblical knowledge. All right, so if we think about this book for a minute, it was written by Yeshua, or Jesus ben Sirach, in the early 2nd century BC, and he was a wisdom teacher. And so when we think about a wisdom teacher, what would a wisdom teacher be?
Philosopher?
Okay, yeah, kind of a philosopher kind of thing, and has a school and has a group of students that he teaches. He had written in Hebrew, but later it was preserved in translated into Greek, and was part of the Septuagint, or the Greek Bible. And in some ways, think of it in the same way that we would think about the book of Proverbs. Okay. Practical pieces of advice and how to live faithfully in the Jewish tradition. So a couple different themes that you'll see is the fear of the Lord, the purpose of trials and tests to refine faith, and then this idea of wisdom. All right, so let's kind of look at some of the book ourselves. So we'll start with Sirach 1:1-20. All wisdom comes from the Lord. It lives with him forever. Who can count the grains of sand in the seas, the drops of rain, or the days of eternity? Who can discover heaven's height, the earth's breadth, the abyss, or wisdom? Wisdom was created before everything else. Right understanding is as old as eternity. To whom was wisdom's root revealed? Who knew her wonderful feats? There is one who is wise, greatly feared, seated upon his throne. The Lord himself created her. He saw her. He measured her. The Lord poured her out over everything he made, to be with each person to the extent that God grants. And he supplied her abundantly to those who love him. Fear of the Lord is a person's glory, boasting, gladness, and crown of rejoicing. Fear of the Lord will cheer the heart, and it will give gladness, joy, and a long life. Things will go well at the end for those who fear the Lord. They will be blessed at the time of death. Wisdom starts with fearing the Lord, and she is joined to the faithful even within the womb. Wisdom built her nest among human beings as an eternal foundation, and they will entrust their offspring to her. Wisdom is fully satisfied with fearing the Lord, and she will make people drunk with her fruits. She will fill all their houses with desirable things and fill their storehouses from her produce. Fearing the Lord is wisdom's crowning garland, sprouting forth peace and restorative health. She rained down skill and insightful knowledge, and she raised up the reputation of those who held on to her. Fearing the Lord is wisdom's root, and her branches yield a long life. So, what is this idea of fearing the Lord? What's the fear of the Lord?
I
Abiding,
was wondering that the same thing.
abiding in his laws.
Okay, abiding in his laws.
Are we supposed to fear the Lord and fear as in the way we think about it?
All right, well, that's a good springboard. So when we talk about fear of the Lord, what does that word fear mean? Because
That there'll be retribution if we do something wrong.
okay,
Mhm.
so in some ways we can talk about fear in the sense that you know being anxious, being upset, um, fearful that we're going to get hurt, we're going to get taken advantage of, that we're going to be chastised, those kinds of things. So that's one definition of fear.
But then it's more like you revere him.
Okay,
You
so
realize you realize his greatness.
yeah, you have a healthy respect.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, as we think about that, and in some ways, I think that fear of the Lord is this idea of having a healthy respect for the Lord and who the Lord is. And so, if we think about it from that standpoint, what does Sirach teach us about fear of the Lord? Go back here a little bit.
That you're going to be blessed if you do that.
Okay, so if you do it, you're going to be blessed. So we should do it so we get blessings, right?
Yeah, but it's like in the New Testament where people think it's works and it's not. So
Says
it does kind of
wisdom.
sound like that.
Nancy, what'd you say?
Wisdom starts with fearing the Lord. I think I heard in there.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So it starts with fearing the Lord. So, but the question is, what does he teach us about fearing of the Lord? As it says, if you want to cheat and look at the heading here, it says, fear of the Lord is wisdom.
Right.
And so, how is that fearing of the Lord and wisdom interconnected? As you kind of look at this and you begin, look at Sirach 1:1, well, actually 1:2,
Yeah, where
and
it says how all the things he makes. And
so as you look at those couple of lines, who can count the grains of sand in the seas, the drops of rain, or the days of uncertainty? Who can discover heaven's height, the earth's breadth, the abyss, or wisdom? So as you just think of those couple of lines there, um,
And it says wisdom was created before everything else.
mhm,
So, like everything came after wisdom.
yeah. Well, hang on for a second. Hold on. We'll come back to that. So those couple of verses, as you listen to them, does it give you an inkling of something else or some other piece of scripture that we might be
Yeah,
familiar within the Hebrew
Yeah.
Bible.
it reminds me of Job.
Exactly. And so when you think about Job, you know where do we see this part? Where do we hear this part?
Where were you when I made the foundations of the earth?
So it's in some ways Job being chastised a bit with God because what did Job do?
What did Job do?
Yep.
Well, God took everything away.
He was suffering, but he never
He
turned
didn't,
his back on God or cursed
No,
God.
right?
no, he didn't do that. But towards the end, um, in some
What did,
ways, he presumed to know God because that's what, he presumes to know God, and then God says, "Well, wait a minute, Job. Were you there when I created the world? Were you there when I put the stars in the sky? When I
Mm.
brought up the land?" And so, in some ways it takes us back to that. And so we think about, wisdom, and it comes from the Lord. And, what is this kind of wisdom about? In some ways, the wisdom is kind of beyond our human understanding, our human comprehension. Now let's circle back. What did you say, Nance?
Which one?
You.
Oh, what did I say?
Ah, I said
Wisdom
we're
was created before everything else.
so that's
Oh,
that's kind of
yes.
interesting. That's kind of interesting. So wisdom was created before anything else. What do you think
Right,
about
and
that?
right understanding is as old as eternity.
Hmm. So where if we're thinking about that, where should our minds go?
Creation,
mhm.
Creation. What was in the middle of the garden?
Tree of good and good and not good and what was it? Knowledge.
The tree of knowledge
Of
and
good
the
and evil.
and the tree of good and evil. And so who did they eat from?
the true good and evil,
The
right?
tree of knowledge.
Truth and knowledge. Yeah, I should know that. Jesus.
So in some ways, you think about it, you go back to the garden and the snake says what? God says you're going to eat of that tree. You're not going to die. You're not going to die. But what was the motivation to eat from the tree of wisdom, the tree of
They thought they
knowledge?
would
Huh?
have better, they thought they would have better knowledge than God, I
Yeah, they
guess.
would thought they'd have the knowledge of God.
Like, yeah.
And so when we think about, where does true knowledge come from?
God,
God. And can we truly appreciate the fullness of God's knowledge and wisdom?
Mm-mm.
No.
No, absolutely.
No. And so, that's fear of the Lord is this wisdom. It's having that healthy understanding about this wisdom. It becomes interesting that, um, as you think about the garden, okay, why did God not allow them to eat from the tree, the knowledge of,
Why did he not?
yeah.
But isn't that part of free will?
Okay, so and sometimes we distill it down into this idea that okay, God put the tree there and God
Mm.
gave them a choice. Okay, God told them not to eat, but they have a choice and they have free will in that. But, did God just, say, hey, don't eat of that tree for the sake of saying, don't eat of that tree, to be a real pain in their butts?
I don't want to say he was testing them, um, but he gave them no choice.
Yeah, I'm not
And they don't, and they
arguing that
didn't,
point.
but they didn't really fear him to listen to him, I guess.
Well, in some ways, I believe that, the God put limits because as human beings, we couldn't handle that wisdom. I kind of think about it in the way I kind of put it into perspective. And did you ever see that? I think it's I'm bad with actors. Is it Jim Carrey?
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
God, was it God Almighty or whatever
God
that was?
Almighty. Okay, yeah.
You know which one I'm talking about?
I never
Mhm.
saw it, but yeah, okay, I know. I've heard of the movie.
So, what if you saw the movie, what's the premise there?
He thought he was God.
Well, no, he thought he presumed that he could be God, and in
Mhm.
some ways he could be better than God.
Huh.
And then all of a sudden he became God, and what happened?
He realized he couldn't handle it.
Yeah, he was overwhelmed and couldn't handle it. So, in some ways, as I kind of meditate and think about this idea of the garden. Yeah, there was a tree that was put in the middle. Yeah, there were limits that were put on it, and in some ways, that's to set boundaries. But those boundaries were put in place to keep us safe.
Mm.
Um, And so I think, when we think about this idea, we're talking about, you know, the fear of the Lord, and this idea of wisdom, that there's things that we just can't know. And think about it. What is, if you think about, you know, the modern times, what's what do we really act like? That we can know everything.
We, meaning we try to act like God.
No, that we think that we can know everything.
We
Oh.
know everything.
Yeah, and in some ways knowing everything and acting like God.
Mhm.
Those kinds of things. I mean, you think about, what are limits? See, like we could take idea of uh stem cells and cloning and those kinds of things. We can presume to know everything, um, and there's becomes no limits. And what happens when there's no limits and no boundaries?
Things go off the rails
Things,
eventually.
things go off the rails big time.
Well, yeah, I mean, just proves it with technology and how that's abused by humans.
Mm-hmm.
And we have this basic attitude that we can, with research, with hard work, we can know everything,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
including, and if we can know everything, we can including God.
Right.
And that becomes an issue. And so I think Sirach begins to teach us that we have to have this healthy fear of the Lord, that you know that in some ways God is mysterious. God is beyond our full comprehension. And as human beings, we need to yield to that.
But I think some people in the scientific world may feel that they don't need God, that they're God. They can do anything that supposedly God can do. They can create life and they can, that
Mhm.
they don't need God.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's, as you think about, this period of the modern period, this period of enlightenment, it's the self-actualization of the individual and, the elevation of knowledge, scientific research and, um, you know, the work of science over, religion over and over
Mhm.
God.
Mhm.
So how does this shape our how does this
Yeah.
shape our daily decision making?
You mean the fear of the Lord? How's that?
Yeah, this section of the section of Sirach that we had read.
Um, well, hopefully it makes you think before you act.
Okay, think before you act.
Um, I mean,
Really, like how much, I mean, I don't know if this is after Jesus was here kind of a thing, but you know, forgive our sins and forgive some of this. But sometimes you think back, like, what the heck did I do it? Doing? Am I going to be, forgiven for that? I mean, I know you ask for forgiveness. God forgives if you're sincere, but sometimes you wonder, like, it really makes you think about what you're doing.
Okay.
Um, and I don't know. Sometimes I don't know. Is it mental illness or is it just evil in people that evidently have no fear of the Lord and they go out and do awful things? And
Well, is it just a matter of, so we could go in that kind of direction as far as, looking at folks that kind of, go off the rails that way
mhm.
and, look at is evil lack of fear of the Lord? Could be. But evil could be just evil as well. But what about, for us, I'm going to call us the normal folk who are
Normal folk.
just trying to muddle through life.
Hmm.
I don't like to think that anything I do or anything I go, I mean, I don't think an hour goes by that I don't think about God and would God approve of what I'm doing, whether it's good or bad. But um, I think it's just always, what would God do? It's like almost like what would Jesus do? It's kind of like, would God be okay with me doing this or that? It's just always there. I mean, for somebody like me who has church and religion and God in my life practically as long as I can remember, it's just like something is just automatically there. I don't even most think about it too much. It's just there.
Okay.
But
Chris,
I
I
like to
see those
think,
eyes going back and forth there.
and I'm thinking how this has shaped daily decision making. I mean, for me, I mean, I want to live a good life.
Hmm.
And those different things listed there, I mean, yeah, I want to try to live like that as best I can. Do I fall short? Of course I do. Um, but I think for me, you want to try to make something better each day. You know,
yeah,
you want to try to improve or you don't want to go back. I wouldn't want to go back and
What do you mean you wouldn't want to go back? What does
well,
that
I
mean
wouldn't
to you?
want to be a really bad person.
Mm.
Um,
I can't picture you ever being a bad person,
yeah,
Chris.
well, and didn't we say something on Sunday about like if like being negative and stuff, you're not happy. It just seems what God has listed there and in through the Torah, it was all for our benefit, really. to enjoy what he has given us.
Okay.
Um,
Jet, what do you think?
I think it's a good reminder to us to like keep it simple and remember how great God is. Like, I think we tend to forget that. We're always thinking about ourselves. I can do this, I can do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not us.
Mm-hmm.
That I mean, we do certain tasks and things like that, of course, as we go through life, but just to remember how great God is.
Okay.
I think of that book about cheap grace, how we water down grace and what it really costs God to give us that.
The cost of discipleship.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Yes.
seems like he's kind of making the people think back to the basics.
Mm-hmm. Nancy and Alan, you got anything to add?
Uh, um, I guess the direction that we seek.
Okay. Yeah, so for me, as I kind of think about this and thinking about how does it shape daily decision making, is in some ways I think, and I was looking at it less from the standpoint of trying to kind of live like a follower of Jesus and those kinds of things, and more kind of about just trying to make it through life. And that sometimes, if we have a healthy fear of the Lord, as Sirach teaches it, that in some ways I should be able to take a breath and enjoy life, and in some ways take some of the weightiness of the world off my shoulders,
mm-hmm.
because God's got it,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Right.
that,
God's in control.
yeah, God's in control, and, uh, the decisions that I make don't necessarily, aren't going to make and break things. That, God is bigger than all of that.
Right.
So let's look at some more Sirach. We'll move to Sirach 2, 1 to 11. My child, if you come to serve the Lord, prepare yourself for testing. Set your heart straight, be steadfast, and don't act hastily in a time of distress. Hold fast to God and do not keep your distance from him, so that you might find strength at your end. Accept whatever happens to you and be patient when you suffer humiliation, because gold is tested with fire, and acceptable people are tested in the furnace of humiliation. Trust him and he will help you, and make your way straight and hope in him. You who fear the Lord, wait for his mercy, and don't turn aside, or else you might fall. You who fear the Lord, trust him, and you won't lose your reward. You who fear the Lord, hope for good things, for unending joy and mercy. Look at the people from long ago and see who trusted in the Lord and who was put to shame, or who remained firm in godly fear and was left behind, or who called upon the Lord and the Lord overlooked him. After all, the Lord is compassionate and merciful. He forgives sins and rescues people in a time of hardship.
Mm.
So, what does Sirach 2 have to say about remaining steadfast in difficult times? I go back here so you can look at it if you like.
Don't lose your faith.
Say that again, Nancy.
Don't lose your faith.
Okay, don't lose your faith. All right.
Look back at others who have suffered and maintained their faith.
Okay, so look at examples, previous examples. Okay, good.
Trust him and he will help you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So what so we kind of go right past the first first little verse there. What's it say? My child, if you come to serve the Lord, prepare yourself for testing.
So he's telling you right there's going to be trials and
Right.
tribulations.
So
Not
if
going
you,
to be easy.
what's that, Jeanette?
It's not going to be easy.
Yeah. So if you choose to follow the Lord, if you know, and you know where, so if we think about this real quick, you know, where in the New Testament would we see something like this?
In the New Testament,
Yeah.
well, for the disciples,
Okay.
I think,
Yeah.
well, they
Jesus.
really
Well, what did Jesus say? If you want to follow me, you got to do what?
It's take up my cross.
Take up your cross. Take up your cross and follow me.
I mean, Jesus suffered, if you want to get really technical.
Mhm. But
I mean, Jesus suffered, and he kept his faith in God, was doing what God wanted him to do.
mhm. But the point that is that, you know, if we choose to serve and follow God, okay, it's not going to be easy.
Mhm.
And then there's going to be times of testing. Okay. And then, you know, if there's going to be testing, there's going to be times where you're going to somewhat feel what? Overwhelmed, anxious. And what's it say? Don't act hastily.
Right.
Don't act hastily. Um, I think these words were meant for me today. Seriously,
On the
we
road driving.
no, it's got nothing to do with that. So you guys know that you know, our practice went through a time of transition.
Yes.
And so we're now working for Jefferson.
Right.
And when we joined Jefferson, they told us that their plan was to move us back to Havertown.
Right.
Plan A was our office we have now. Plan B is another office in Havertown. Well, about 4 weeks ago, I think it was in the papers that Jefferson had lost a lot of money. And
Oh,
yeah, well, everybody, all the health systems are losing a lot of money. So I don't know how they made the papers and others didn't, but so they have made an economic decision to freeze all capital spending unless it's an emergency.
Mm.
So 2 weeks ago, we had a meeting with our, you know, bosses. You always know it's a big meeting when an HR representative is there. Your manager, the manager's manager, and the manager's manager's there. So, so they met with us and basically had told us that our plan to go back to Havertown has been kiboshed, and that
mm,
we're going to be
Permanently.
well, they said for the immediate future.
Mm.
So, you know, I know that they're freezing capital for a year. So probably a year. And by the time you're in a place for a year and everything, it's, you know, you kind of come to the realization that's where you're going to be.
Yeah.
But my point is that with that, um, there's been a lot of anxiety, especially with some of our staff,
Hmm.
to the point that today, one of them was like, the sky is falling, the sky is falling, loosey goosey kind of thing. And this was the message today, you know, don't act hastily in a time of distress. Let it go. Let it go. Trust God and let it go. So I just had a snicker as I was kind of reading. It's like, dude, sense of humor. This is
Yeah.
apropos for today. All right. So you know, how do we remain faithful? Okay, we remain faithful because think about chapter 1 as well. So chapter 1 talked about this idea, the fear of the Lord. And why do we fear the Lord? Because the Lord has wisdom, has more, God can see the bigger picture,
Hmm.
and our vision is very tunneled. And so, as we think about, well, how do we where'd I go? Oh, what did I do here? Okay, there we go. So as we're thinking, how do we remain steadfast? First, think about that fear of the Lord and the wisdom. Secondly, know that God is there and we can rely on those, examples. Now we can use examples that are Hebrew Bible, David, Joshua, Moses, all those. We can use New Testament ones, or we can even think of ones that are more contemporary in our own lives. But, you know, um, those people that have been resilient and have remained steadfast can serve as good role models for us. All right, let's look at another section. This is Sirach 24, 1 to 12. Wisdom will praise herself, and she will boast in the midst of her people. In the assembly of the Most High, she will open her mouth, and in the presence of his heavenly forces, she will boast. I came forth from the mouth of the Most High, and I covered the earth like a mist. I lived in the heights, and my throne was in a pillar of cloud. I alone encircled the vault of heaven and walked in the depths of the abysses. In the waves of the sea and in every land and among every people and nation, I led the way. I sought a resting place among all of these. In whose allotted territory should I make my home? Then the Creator of all things gave me a command. The one who created me pitched my tent and said, make your dwelling in Jacob, and let Israel receive your inheritance. Before the ages, from the beginning, he created me. Until eternity, I will never fail. I ministered before him in the holy tent, and so I was established in Zion. In the same way, he made the dearly loved city my resting place and established my authority in Jerusalem. I took root in a glorified people among the people the Lord chose for his inheritance. So, Sirach describes wisdom as a dwelling of God's people. And so as we think about and we look at this, this little section here, and we see those kinds of pictures of, God's dwelling. What are some of those Hebrew images that come to mind? Now, this idea of pitching the tent.
Is he referring to the tabernacle when they wandered in the desert?
Yeah. So what? Yeah. One thing we got here is, you know, well, first, in the assembly of the Most High, she will open her mouth. In the presence of his heavenly forces, she will boast. I came forth from the mouth of the Most High God, and I covered the earth like a mist. So as you think about that, where does your mind go?
Is that creation?
I was
Well, it
just
goes back to the creation. God, what God spoke,
uh-huh.
and things came into being. Okay. I lived in the heights, and my throne was in a pillar of cloud. And I alone encircled the vault of heaven and walked in the depths of the abysses. More creation language.
Mhm.
In the waves of the sea and every land and among every people and nation, I led the way. Okay, so a lot of creation language. And then here, I sought a resting place among all of these. In whose allotted territory should I make my home? Then the creator of all things gave me a command. The one who created me pitched my tent. We think the word tent, tabernacle,
Mhm.
and said, make your dwelling in Jacob and let Israel receive your inheritance. And so that's exactly what happened with the tabernacle, right?
Right.
This God coming and pitching his tent. Um, and so I was established in Zion. Okay, in Zion, Jerusalem. In the same way, he made his dearly beloved city a resting place and established my authority in Jerusalem. So this idea of the tent and the idea of the temple. And so if we kind of look at that, we got three of those images of tabernacle: creation, the tent, and the temple.
Temple.
Now, where else would we see this idea of tabernacling? And it's not in the Old Testament.
When they built the shelters
No,
for the,
no,
no?
no. I'll give you an A plus today if you get it right.
In the
I'll
New
tell
Testament,
I'll tell you it's in one of the Gospels.
Creation tent and tabernacle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not coming to me.
It's not in the Synoptic Gospels.
Is it in like Matthew, Mark, or Luke?
I said not in the Synoptic Gospels.
Oh,
So the Synoptic Gospels are Matthew, Mark, Luke.
Luke.
So there's only one of them left.
John.
There you go. The Gospel of John.
Oh,
It's
the
built
New Jerusalem?
No, that's in Revelation.
when he's the mansion, when we're in John,
No,
he's
nobody else.
now I'm failing here.
In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was
Word
with
was
God, and the Word was
Was
God.
what John.
He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and apart from him, nothing came into being that has come into being. In him was life, and the life was light, the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. Okay, and then as you kind of go down further, get down to verse 14, and the word became flesh and dwelt among us. The word dwelt means tabernacled. And the word became flesh and tabernacled amongst us. So as you think about that, you see the same kind of thing. So here is, an extra Hebrew Bible or Hebrew book that's talking about this idea of what? incarnation.
Okay.
Okay, so this whole idea of tabernacle is in some ways God, you know, um, incarnating, come God's presence coming into being. And so just as, he talks about this idea of wisdom, you know, it kind of even gives us a kind of, a forbearance of Jesus. Okay. Now how do we experience that today? Or I should ask, do we experience that today?
Oh, wouldn't we consider our church the tabernacle?
I don't know, do we?
I don't know. We gather to worship the
Mhm.
Lord in the house.
So the tabernacle is,
But
that thin place where, in some ways we experience the presence of God. I'm going to use the word a special way. And the reason I say that is because, if we think about it, you think about, the Israelites, they had the tabernacle, but God also was with them, in the desert before they had a tabernacle. He led them through the desert with a tabernacle, but it was that tabernacle that provided or was the conduit to experience God in kind of a special way. And so, go ahead.
but for us today, we're the tabernacles,
Okay.
dwells in us.
Okay.
So isn't that how we experience it today? By him dwelling in us?
What do you think?
I would say, yeah.
Okay. Because we'll go back here to this, go back to the scripture a little bit. Um, when they're talking about this, you're really what they're talking about is sort of this palpable presence of God. Um, in God's presence. So yeah, can it be in our lives? Sure. Can it be in churches? Sure. Um, those thin places where we can, come close to God, aren't just relegated to certain places. It can happen. I mean, I think that's what, I think of, we had a little bit talking about, I guess it was in Sunday school. Is that where we talked about the curtain last week?
Ye-
Curtain in
Yeah,
the
Oh,
temple?
yeah, the
yeah,
curtain, yes.
Yeah, because I think it was Jeanette, you were talking about the curtain, weren't you?
Yeah, I
And
was the one. Who brought that.
talking about this idea of the curtain in two so
Right.
that all can have
Access.
access to God. And as I thought about that, it's like, yeah, that's true. But I would also think about the reverse being true. That just like, that curtain allows you to go into God's presence, that curtain allow with no curtain allows God's presence to come out into the world. And that through the death and resurrection of Jesus, that spirit that was contained in that special way in the Holy of Holies is now kind of come out onto the work, out onto the earth, and has begun to do its work. That as Paul says, the resurrection is the first fruits. Okay, and so Jesus' resurrection has kind of ushered in, a process where God's kingdom is beginning to infiltrate and embed itself in the world. And so as we think about that kind of thing, we think about those tabernacling experiences. Yeah, they can be a lot of different places
Mhm.
and see different things. So if we think about Sirach, what can we take away from it? So as we looked at those, three little sections, what's one little nugget that you take away this week?
Fear of the Lord.
Fear of the Lord. Okay. Anything else?
I think we really have to accept that God's in control.
Okay.
Because sometimes you look around at what's going on in the world and you say, how can God be in control of this chaos?
Mhm.
But you have to keep that in mind when you see all kinds of hell breaking loose all over the world and in this country, for that matter.
Yeah.
And to be reminded that God's wisdom, he can see the bigger picture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good. Good.
And the
And
fear of
when,
God is a healthy
Yeah.
thing.
Oh,
It's not
yeah.
something to, it's not talking about fearing him as in, fear, but it's kind of a healthy thing to,
Mhm. Healthy respect.
Respect.
yes.
All right. Well, I hope that was informative. Hold on
It
a
was.
second. I want to try to where'd it go? I, let me see if I think did I put the next one?
What is going to be next week?
Yeah, let me see. It wasn't there. Let me get rid of this recording.